us, and there's only two. Okay, so like I said, last round of speeches. And so, as many have said today, thank you all so much for being here. It's been a fascinating day, but it's a wonderful day to have you all. And I have the distinct pleasure of introducing our last speaker, Mike Levine. But I also have the privilege of reading some words by Suzanne Gaskins, who could not be here today, but was willing to share her thoughts and comments with us. And rather than introduce her, she did an excellent job of doing it. I know because I read her speech already. So I will let her introduce herself. So these are words of a for me, lifelong, and for mom and dad, mostly lifelong family friend. I'm so sorry I can't be with you today, but I am delighted to share with you all a few thoughts I have about Bill and our friendship. I first met Bill as Susan's husband when they moved to Chicago, but didn't know him that well. I got to know him much better when Bill and Susan, Charles and Sab and Steve Maureen, shared with us the care of our firstborn 3-year-olds who were steadfast friends, and then their siblings as well as they arrived on the scene. That was when Bill began to work his magic on me and worm his way deep into my heart, and there he still sits today. Bill possessed the joy of life and the ability to live in the moment that few people have, and it was contagious. It invited me to be fully present when with him. He added to that a sense of humor, allowing him to go with the flow. Many of you had kids coached by Bill in some sport or another. I will never forget his coaching style of our 5-year-olds playing t-ball, although I witnessed it almost 4 decades ago. He knew so much and cared so deeply and worked so hard with the kids to help them be the best t-ball players they could be. But he could also stand back and laugh while he watched a tiny outfielder pick dandelions as an unseen ball rolled past him. This gift of pairing joy, presence, and humor made him an ideal caretaker of small children and a friend you could happily spend hours with. Bill carried at the same time a strong commitment to his work, his clinical practice, his teaching, his research, and his work on medical ethics. Motivated by high standards and aimed at demanding not only the best out of himself, but also working to ensure the people he trained reached their full potential, and that the institutions within his sphere were the best that they could be. Sort of like his approach with the budding t-ball players, but perhaps with less patience when things went awry. Bill also had the ability to look at difficult things straight on and talk about them openly and clearly. He could do this with politics, interpersonal kerfluffles, and many other things. His positions may not have always been particularly subtle or nuanced, but when facing immediate and difficult choices, nuance is not always one's friend, especially in matters of health. I relied heavily on his candid and clear opinions, and I know I was not alone. Call Bill was always our first step when one of our kids was sick or hurt, and often he could, on the spot, either resolve the problem or convince us there wasn't one. But he also helped me evaluate the implications of my 2 miscarriages, guided me through my husband John's protracted battle with hepatitis, and sat down for an entire afternoon to teach me what I needed to know before going out to California to support my mother's impending death. He was always there when I needed him, and his direct advice was invaluable. Bill was surrounded by a particularly strong personal force field, one that was organized by love, generosity, and wisdom, and opinions. When I entered into that space, time sort of stopped. That was true 40 years ago, and it was just as true the last time I was with him. We were 2 good friends, laughing together, pontificating, maybe even arguing about all sorts of important things happening out in the world, and feeling safe enough together to reflect on the meanings of our personal lives, their adventures, their pleasures, and their travails. It felt like such a safe and happy place to be. These days, my memories of Bill easily bring me back to that place, both in mind and in heart. Of course, it's not quite the same as sitting at the kitchen table with him, but it's a lasting gift I am so grateful for. And so our final speaker for the day will be Mike Levine, who is sitting right here in front of me. Mike has been, he's known me my whole life, pretty much. He's known my mom and dad their whole lives. And the number of times I have seen Mike over the fence, or we have discussed the Bears not doing so good, or the Sox perhaps doing slightly better, or vice versa, are literally uncountable. I have done that more times than anybody can count, even though numbers go on forever. Through that time, there's lots of great memories. You know, my dad talking to things with Mike. But one of the things that I always really, really enjoyed is whenever they would discuss coming over, or dinners, or something like that, they would talk for a while, they would make all these decisions, and then they would say, you know what? Let me have my Susan call your Susan, and they'll figure it out. And so, Mike.
Thank you, Xander, and I just want to say that I'm honored to speak about my close friend and neighbor, Bill Meadow. I knew Bill for more than 40 years, and the Levine and the Golden Meadow families were next door neighbors for most of that time. It is rare when neighbors become family, but that is what happened with the Meadows and the Levines, and Bill played a big role in cementing our close relationship. When I told Susan that I would need a minimum of 1 hour to speak about Bill, she cut me down to 5 minutes. So I better talk fast. All of us in this room who knew Bill Meadow were fortunate because Bill was an exceptional, one-of-a-kind guy. And I think we've been hearing that over and over again in the talks. We heard a lot about his powerful professional achievements, but there are 4 aspects of Bill that are most meaningful to me and all the Levines. And they are, first, Bill was a straight shooter who did not shy away from telling you how he saw things. Second, Bill, along with Susan, was extremely generous. Third, Bill was a natural born teacher, and we saw that on a weekly and sometimes on a daily basis. Fourth, Bill loved Susan and their family unconditionally. And I just want to say, I wasn't planning this, but it's so, aren't these themes clear from talk to talk? There's a consistency, and there's this consistency because this was the guy, this was the man, this was the mensch, Bill Meadow. Now, in terms of the first point, living side by side and sharing many family dinners together on Bill and Susan's deck or in one of our dining rooms, we got to observe Bill in action as a straight shooter. Conversations were always lively, and Bill made sure that we discussed important topics. He was never shy about disagreeing with us. He might say, "I love you, but you are wrong." It was never, as a result, we learned a lot from him in terms of interesting points of information, ethical decision-making, and how to hold your ground in a conversation rather than politely caving. In terms of the second point, Bill's generosity, this was extreme. Bill would often, spontaneously invite us over for dinner. He always bought and prepared at least twice as much food as necessary. And it wasn't because Susan and Susan were telling him what to do, it was because he just did it. He never skimmed. This generosity extended to a huge circle of friends, and Susan and Bill together created a wonderful friend network that many of us continue to benefit from. Third, Bill was a natural teacher, and this played out in many ways, way beyond the medical center. Despite his busy professional life, he somehow found time to coach baseball and soccer. Coach Bill was well known to many Hyde Parkers for his intense demeanor on the sideline of soccer and baseball games. Like all good coaches, Bill taught his players how to play the game. But he also imparted wisdom, including lessons for life. For example, life is not always fair. He also found time to tutor not only his kids, but the Levine kids and others. He would sit at the kitchen table with the kids when they were U-High students to help them with chemistry and physics. Our kids would come home with phrases like, "Go to the moles," which helped them, I don't know what the hell that means, which helped them with their chemistry understanding, and God knows I could not help my kids with chemistry or physics, so thank God for Bill. My favorite example of Bill's expert teaching came when our daughter Hannah, sitting here, was about 3 years old, the age of her son now. She was suddenly in great pain due to a twisted elbow, commonly referred to as nurse's maid elbow. We were in Michigan and not eager to go to an ER. I called Bill, who was in Chicago, and he told me exactly what to do, step by step, to twist her arm back into the correct pain-free position. When I excitedly proclaimed success and that Hannah no longer was in pain, Bill was not surprised. I was. Note that this was way before FaceTime and Zoom. This was all by phone. I know about some teaching awards Bill received at the medical school, but boy, if there was one for friends, we'd nominate Bill for that one. There's one other way in which Bill exercised his teaching skill. He helped me, a development professional, and many others in my field, helped us build relationships with donors. I often asked Bill to conduct a tour for the NICU, and he always agreed to take the time to do it. One of the most notable tours he gave was for the Stephen family. His exceptional tours for several family members on different occasions, and his continuing relationship with the family helped us close a $10 million gift for neonatology. The fourth and most notable aspect of Bill, something that all the Levines got to see on a daily basis, is his unconditional love for Susan and their beautiful family. Bill adored Susan and she him. Together they raised 3 wonderful kids, Xander, Schmug, and Beanie. And much to Bill's delight, the family grew to include Jess, Lucy, and Drew, and of course grandchildren, Cody, Zia, and Will. It was always clear that family was Bill's North Star and came before anything else. Now, I want to conclude by reading a poem that I wrote for a fest trip in Bill's honor. The poem personifies the close and meaningful relationship I have with the dearest of friends. And I just want to add that it's interesting that Xander commented about talking over the backyard fence. The title of the poem is Over the Backyard Fence. Conversations over the backyard fence. For more than 3 decades, we shared a lot about family, sports, and topics dense, with meaning for us as we stood on this spot, by the border between our backyards, a place so familiar that we could know what we do next, as if playing cards in the friendliest of games played without dough, by 2 old friends who care and who bother to understand the needs of the other. Bill, we miss you.